Asteroid of fear.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Men of the House podcast. And today we have Alan Lazaros, who is one of the co-founders of Next Level University. And hopefully you guys have heard that episode with his business partner, Kevin Palmieri. And if you haven't, go back and give that a listen after you listen to this one, of course. How are you doing today, Alan?
I'm doing very well. It's been a long day, but a great day. And thank you again for having me. Like I said, I don't take it lightly to be able to speak into the lives of other people. I started listening to podcasts 9 years ago, and they definitely helped me get some direction and some guidance that helped tremendously. And so now I'm on the other end of that, and I'm really grateful. So thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being a part of this because, you guys at Next Level University are all about improvement. Tell us a little bit about your role there, your title, your role, and then, of course, I want to get into a little bit of your background, how you got into this Next Level University and deciding to be an entrepreneur, and especially of all things entrepreneurial self-improvement.
So my title, we'll start there, is the CEO, Chief Executive Officer of Next Level University. We have a 21-person team now, which has been really, really awesome and super meaningful, but also really challenging from a leadership perspective because it's all global and different time differences and all that. I'm also the Chief Financial Officer. That actually used to be Kev. Now he's the Chief Sales Officer and I do the finances because we realized that I'm the computer engineer numbers guy. So I think I should probably be in the numbers. And that's been a big transition, so that's good. And we're also both the founders and the co-hosts. He's kind of the host and I'm the co-host. He's more responsible for the podcast than I am, but we both have done now 1,725 episodes, I think, at this stage. It's been a hell of a journey. And what was the second part of your question?
How did you get into self-improvement as an entrepreneur? What was the catalyst of, why you decided to start Next Level University?
Yeah, so that's actually a great beginning origin story. So I used to work, and we'll probably get in throughout the episode into like the deeper layers of my past, but I was essentially working in corporate and I had a computer engineering bachelor's and I went straight for my master's in business. And then I was off to the races in corporate and I rose pretty quickly. I went from 65 to 85, 85 to 105, 105 to 125, and then I landed at around 180 in my early 20s in terms of $180,000 per year.
Nice.
And so I was a global 1% earner. I have to say global because that's not a 1% earner in the US. But globally, I was a 1% earner in my early 20s. And I was in a lot of college debt. I had $84,000 worth of college debt, and I paid all that off in one single year, which I was really proud of. And then and this is the interesting thing, I'm in my early 20s. I grew up after my stepfather left with very low income. So I learned how to just live on very little. And then I did really well in a very short amount of time after graduating with my master's in business. And so I paid off 84 grand worth of debt in a single year back in 2014. And I had $150,000 accumulated in an investment account for Vanguard. And I bought a bunch of tech companies, including the company I was working for, which was Cognex. So essentially, I did a bunch of job hopping after college. I worked for a bunch of different tech companies. I worked for iRobot. I worked for Oz Development. I worked for Sensata Technologies. I worked for a company called Tyco Safety Products, Lens Americas, all these different technology-based companies all throughout New England, really. I eventually landed at a company called Cognex, and I'm in my mid 20s. I don't have family. I don't have kids. I had a beautiful girlfriend named Courtney at the time who I lived with, and we split the rent, and it was $500 each. And so I drove a car that I bought for $5,000 cash. It was a 2004 Volkswagen Passat. And so why did I start Next Level University with Kev? Kev's my business partner. He's also been on your show. So we talked about that. The real reason is because I worked in industrial automation at Cognex. Cognex is a company that does machine vision equipment. And so picture this camera that you're potentially watching me on right now, and picture water bottles going down a manufacturing line, and it double checks the cap is on properly and the logo is correct. And there's software in the camera that checks and measures everything and makes its quality assurance for manufacturing.
Right.
And so Cognex is the biggest machine vision company in the world. And that's what we do. And so I managed a territory. So I started an inside sales engineering team there. And then I was promoted to outside sales engineering. And I managed Vermont, Connecticut, and Western Massachusetts. So that was my territory in my early 20s, commission-based mostly, but there was a base salary too. And they do very well. Automation is increasing exponentially. And so that's kind of my point. And this is the time in my life where I started to realize something was happening. And I've kind of always known this because I've always been a techie. Essentially, I realized this, and I used to not share this because I was too cowardly. The truth of the matter is, statistically speaking, the less educated population tends to have more children and have them younger. So imagine a young couple who is less educated. They let's say they have 5 kids, and let's say those 5 kids have 5 kids, and let's say those 5 kids have 5 kids. And they all have them younger, typically, statistically.
Right.
Whereas Emilia and I, so she's 29 and I'm 35, and we still don't have children yet. And so statistically speaking, again, I used to be too much of a coward to say this. Statistically speaking, the more educated population has less children and waits longer. And so we have a less educated population growing at an exponentially larger rate than the educated population. Now, here's the problem. If you see that in your mind as a graph that's exponential, we have an uneducated population that's increasing exponentially, and we have automation that is happening exponentially. And so the jobs that the less educated people need are decreasing at an exponentially faster rate. And so if you ever go to a grocery store and you see these self-checkout things, I remember one time I went to a McDonald's, and it was off the highway, the Mass Pike, Massachusetts. And the McDonald's came to me on a conveyor belt.
Oh,
Yeah, it was wild.
I think
And
they have one in
so
Fort Worth like that.
nice. So the problem with that, though, is that the amount of jobs available for the less educated is decreasing exponentially, while the population of the less educated is increasing exponentially. So I saw this problem because I would travel to these manufacturing facilities and I would see these pictures on the walls of the way things used to be. And I would see the 70s, 80s, 90s, and there'd be full factories, and there'd be thousands, sometimes hundreds, thousands of workers, not hundreds of thousands, but hundreds and thousands. And now it's just one floor manager and all robots. And so I would see how much automation has taken jobs and how much fewer now some of those jobs get replaced, of course, and some of them don't. And another good example is when there's self-driving trucks, all of the truck drivers are now going to be out of the job. So my point is, I was making a lot of money taking more jobs. Now, industrial automation is not a bad thing because it makes companies more efficient, which makes prices go down, which is good for consumers. So I'm not making automation the problem here. I am a pro technology human being. Okay. Ever since the first plow that helped people farm, we've been having a higher overall quality of life. So I'm a progressive technologist for sure. But if you're not a part of the solution, you're part of the problem. So automation is going to happen whether I'm a part of it or not. But I realize these people are in trouble. And so if you have an open heart, open mind, and you're willing to put in the work, and that's the key point, I believe in something called open source knowledge. So we created a podcast that helps people rebuild themselves and retool themselves for a bigger, better, brighter future, rather than me taking jobs away. Because there was this one manufacturing facility that I was at. Think of a really famous ice cream company. You'll probably land on the one I'm talking about. And I remember literally making a big commission check and making a sale, and then realizing that those 4 people over there that are checking the ice cream containers for quality assurance just lost their jobs. And those families are now going to suffer potentially because of me. And I'm going to go home with my big fat check and go be wealthy like all my other graduates of the top tech school that I went to. And so I don't think it's a fair world. I don't think it ever has been. I don't think it ever will be. But what I do know is that if you have the ability to learn and you have the work ethic, I want you to be able to come to Next Level University and retool and build a bigger, better, brighter future. Not everyone will, but anyone can. And I think that that's really why we started the company. Is I used to have a company called Alan Lazaros LLC 9 years ago that said what you'll never learn in school but desperately need to know, because I always felt like I had such an advantage because I learned so much and I was so curious. I needed to understand how the economy works and how I work and how human beings work and how physics work and all these things. And so when you're in the world and you're really well educated, you have a lot more choices. And unfortunately, a lot of us don't seek the knowledge that would really benefit us. And so hopefully my company now, Next Level University, Level Up Your Life, Love, Health, and Wealth, is helping people in over 170 countries now, like really retool and work hard to build that brighter future rather than be victim of automation and circumstance.
Wow, I've never, out of all the episodes and whatnot I've never heard that story. So that's pretty cool to kind of learn how you got into it and kind of what the catalyst was. But with that, on that note, I have to ask you, other than the money, because if you grew up with less money for your stepfather leaving, so I know that that was a perk. What else did you get from it that was fulfilling until you had that kind of realization and pivoted towards next level university and helping people retool? What was something positive and fulfilling that you were getting out of your automation job or your tech job?
Ah, what an interesting question. No one's ever asked me that before because most of it was not super fulfilling. What did I enjoy? I got to learn so much. It was really cool to see. Okay, so I don't. I'm technically not supposed to talk about any of my customers or any of that. So because it's a publicly traded company, I'm not supposed to talk about anything.
Right.
Here's my point. I imagine a chip manufacturer that's really big. Okay.
Hmm.
I got to see how all that's made, and that manufacturing facility is in Connecticut, and I got to witness all of it. I got to witness the way the bag is printed, and the way the chips are baked, and the way they package them, and it's really cool. I'm also a tech geek, so I
Hmm.
adore learning how things work and why they work that way. And so I think, and the other thing too, I was actually very impressed with the cleanliness of the food manufacturing. And so a lot of people think that some of these manufacturing facilities are really toxic or negative, or maybe they're not in compliance or whatever. I
Right.
was actually pleased. There's always that saying of, don't work at McDonald's because then you'll never eat McDonald's again. I didn't have that experience at all at these manufacturing facilities. I saw how these products were made and I was like, yeah, this is actually really pretty good, honestly. Shampoo manufacturers. I've been in all the different kinds of facilities. I remember I was in a Cracker Barrel once. I thought that was really cool because they manufacture a lot of their own rocking chairs and chessboards and stuff.
Oh,
So that was really fulfilling. Is just being able to learn how things are built,
uh-huh.
and that was really just awesome. So cool.
Did you get any, when you were ended up managing territories, did you get any leadership experience that has proven to be valuable now,
Mm.
especially as you guys have grown? I mean, leadership, I think, is a kind of a constant progression of learning. So
Yeah, it's the hardest thing in the world,
it is.
in my opinion. So I always say leadership has been nothing short of absolutely brutal, but it's also the most meaningful work that you can do, in my opinion. It's also the most valuable skill in the world. When I was at computer engineering school, I felt like I had a really smart group of friends and I was on academic scholarships. So I needed to perform because if I didn't, I would lose my financial aid, I would lose my scholarships, and I would not be able to continue. And so I surrounded myself with the geniuses I could find. And I remember thinking they're going to be so much better off than me because they're so much better at computer programming. So, for example, computer engineering is there's electrical engineering and there's computer engineering. Electrical is more of the circuits and the wiring of your house and that kind of stuff. And then computer engineering is more software, firmware. There's some hardware languages and stuff. But at the end of the day, it's more coding. It's more coding
Right.
based. I learned both, but we went down the computer engineering road, and I'm glad we did because that's where things are headed, to be honest. But I remember thinking I'm in trouble compared to some of these guys, and I realize now I had bad habits. I partied a lot, that kind of stuff. I think I'd be much better off now. But they came from schools, high schools that were much nicer than mine. I came from a much more poor rural area,
Right.
and most of these kids came from very wealthy families, and not most of them, but a lot of them. And they came from schools that were really had computer programming, and they had AP computer science, and they had all these different courses that I had never taken. I mean, we barely even had computers in our school. So, I mean, we had computers, but not good ones and that kind of thing. And so I was like, I'm screwed. And after college, I went from I think I'm screwed to whoa, I have a huge advantage. And the huge advantage is leadership. And so to answer your original question, did I learn leadership in at Cognex or in my industrial automation job? And the answer is yes. And I think sales in many ways is leadership because what is leadership? Leadership is influence. Right now, I'm
Right.
actually being a leader to anyone who's watching or listening to this. I'm influencing you. I'm in your mind. I'm in your consciousness. And hopefully, I'm influencing you in a positive way. I believe that I am. And I didn't realize this, but I partied a lot in high school, partied a lot in college, partied a lot in corporate. Cognex's motto is work hard, play hard. I used to say work hard, play harder. And I'm not necessarily proud of that, by the way. But, anyways, I was always a leader. I could always rally people around a common core value or a common cause. And I do that at NLU now. The difference is I used to rally people at a party, and now I rally people. I could get everybody playing Beirut and everybody playing Flip Cup and that kind of thing. And now I took those natural powers, for lack of better phrasing, to much better means and better ends. In Cognex, I was managing a bunch of different accounts. I had a bunch of colleagues. I actually got to bring a lot of my friends from WPI, Worcester Polytechnic Institute. It's kind of like a mini MIT,
Mhm.
into Cognex. And I remember that I did a photo shoot with the company. They thought I hit a grand slam. They had this great referral program because they would use recruiters to try to recruit top talent. And instead of giving huge recruiter bonuses, they wanted to hire from within. And so I brought my colleagues from college into the company. Four of them, 4 or 5 of them actually. And so it went from 3 to 6 to 9 to 12. I think I ended up at 15, and I split that with someone who we ended up recruiting. At the end of the day, that was one of the ways I made a lot more money. And I would say that's leadership too. And so yes, I learned a ton about leadership. The problem is I didn't know what it was. So it wasn't conscious leadership. It was just unconscious
Kind of natural.
influence. Yeah, it was so natural. And then there's the whole question about, are leaders born or are they made? And I think the truth is it's both.
I do
I
too.
do. You do too. Nice. Yeah.
Mhm.
So Kev, for example, he is a leader, but he's a different type of leader. And there's 6 different styles of leadership that we can get into if you want to. But he's a participatory leader and he's a transactional leader. And sometimes he's a servant leader. One of my other chief officers, Christina, is a servant leader. I'm more of a transformational leader. And we can go into what that all means. But I never knew it. I didn't know that I was a leader. I just intuitively knew. And a lot of times I was not leading in the best ways, in my honest opinion, but I was always good at it for sure.
Well, it's interesting because I think when you kind of have that, if you're naturally a leader, that kind of you have that born leadership aspect, you can do it unknowingly and you kind of don't know why people follow you. And
Mhm.
therefore, it's difficult to pinpoint maybe what kind of leadership style you actually have. And I think when you take your first leadership roles, people are always like, well, what kind of leadership style do you have? And it's always an interesting question because, part of you doesn't know, and then part of you wants to say maybe the right thing, I guess, especially if it's like a job interview. And so, yeah, I would consider myself a servant leader. I've never heard of a transformational in terms of what it means in leadership style, and I would probably say I'm definitely participatory as well. And I had
Mhm.
never heard the word, would you say transactional?
Yeah. Yep.
What are transactional and transformational?
Yeah. So I can go through the 6. I think it's
Yeah,
I think it's
let's go through it.
powerful. So for anyone who's not studied leadership, and again, this is the 6 that I use. There's a bunch of different ways to frame it, but
Hmm.
this is the 6 that I think of. So the first one, and this is the highest one or the most effective one, which is transformational leader, and we can go into each. But I'll give you the list first because otherwise my
Okay.
brain will mess it up. So transformational leader is number 1. Number 2 is transactional. Number 3 is dictator or assertive leader. Assertive leader. The 4th is participatory. The 5th is servant, and the 6th is delegative.
Hmm.
So they're kind of self-explanatory, but I'll go through each. So delegative, it means you delegate really well.
Yeah.
And you know those people that delegate really well, but they don't do much themselves?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a delegative leader, and you better have a good amount of money, ma'am or sir. Transactional is you're really good at bartering services. So if I give you $20, you'll do this hourly thing, and then I'll go hire someone else and that kind of thing. So transactional means you hire freelancers all the time, and your relationship is based on transactions, which
Right.
is similar to delegative, but a little different. And then you've got assertive. So I was not an assertive leader. That's actually the one I'm working on because I'm kind of a coward, to be honest. A social coward is what I would call it, which is ironic because how can you be a transformational leader and a coward? And the truth is, the extent to which you're a transformational leader is the extent of your courage.
Right.
That's like a new understanding, but you have to be competent too. And so I'll spend a lot of time on transformational leader because I think that's where most people want to get to, even if it's not natural. And so then you've got participatory, which is what you think it is. I'll do it with you. Let's do this together. A lot of people are just great support players. That's the servant leader.
Well,
So
and it's kind
Christina,
of too like a buy-in. Like you want people to buy in by showing them you'll participate with them.
exactly. Yeah. And the truth of the matter is the very best leader in the world uses all six. And
Mm,
that's they leverage all six. So if you want to be a transformational leader, you have to know when to deploy each of the six. Sometimes I have to be assertive, but I can't always be assertive. That's like using your right hand always when you're Muay Thai is a martial arts where
mhm.
it's called the art of eight limbs. You use your hands, your elbows, your knees, and your legs. And that's like only using your right arm and tying all the rest behind your back.
Right.
And I think that that's a really terrible way to lead, in my opinion. I think people always say, well, do the right thing. I think that's very ignorant. I think who can do the right thing at the right time, in the right way, in the right amount, with the right people, for the right reason. And that's why it's so exhausting. Leadership is so exhausting because you don't know the right move to make. And it's what is the next optimal chess move for humans? Like it's brutal, quite
Yes,
frankly.
sometimes it's kind of a either previous situations and you don't know about the situations because you haven't been in them. Sometimes you can leverage that experience, but I think other times it's about making a choice, just simply making a choice, making a decision when everybody's looking to you to make that decision. And I can say that kind of my leadership changed the story of having to bury a dog that was hit on the ambulatory clinic property, and nobody wanted to come and deal with the dog other than they would throw it in the dumpster. DPS or animal services wouldn't come get it because it was technically not in the highway. And so I went and picked it up after a meeting because I felt that my team were all looking to me to make a decision that was humane, compassionate, what quote unquote the right thing to do. And so at that time I had to decide, I had to go, okay, how do they're looking to me to make the right decision, and so I have to do whatever I think is right. And what I thought was right was if I had to borrow my grandfather's truck and go pick up a dog and bury it on the 12 acres where we lived, then that was the right thing. But there was a level of buy-in from the team after that, because they knew I wouldn't take the easy road, which was I could have just had the maintenance man throw it in the dumpster because I was at a meeting.
I'm reading a book right now called The High Road Leadership. It's by John Maxwell. And we know, I think, what the high road is. It's just harder to take it. And sometimes it's unclear what the high road is, but I think deep down, if we're really honest with ourselves, we know. And that you just took the high road on that. And sometimes it feels easier to take the quick fix or whatever. But at the end of the day, the high road requires, and this is the part that I've never been able to fully articulate. People say we'll take the high road. The truth is you have to become the type of person who can. Not everyone can climb Mount Everest. You need the right tools, you need the right guides, you need the right training, you need the right oxygen mask, you need the right oxygen tanks, you need enough resources in the tank, you need enough sleep. So, yeah, take the high road. It sounds cool on a bumper sticker. But are you capable of taking the high road? Do you have the humility to take the high road? And then the moment you take the high road gets higher. And so going back to the leadership thing, if you want to go and become a transformational leader, I'll go through them quickly. So delegative is delegate. Transactional is mostly money based. Assertive is your dictator, kind of like a mush dog's mush, right? And then the other one is participatory,
Hmm.
means you do it together. And then the other one is servant. And servant leader means I'll do it myself. I got this. I'm here to serve. And if you want to be a transformational leader, you have to deploy all five of those when they're appropriate. And so if someone is being disrespectful, I have to be assertive. If someone is next level live, we have a live event every year we do, and I needed to participate because I was setting up the cameras. There's a lot of things that I do as a CEO that a lot of people would say you shouldn't be using that as your time. And the truth is, there's some truth to that, but there's also not, because the team needs to see that I'm here with you
Right.
and I'm not above this. Just because there are better uses of my time doesn't mean I'm above this, because I'm not. You have to pick and choose, because if all I ever did was set up cameras, the business would go out of business. But if I'm never willing to set up a camera because I'm above that,
Right.
the team would immediately be like, okay, well, you shouldn't be CEO, right? And they should. I mean, there's some CEOs that shouldn't be, because I always say this. If someone ever says I disagree and I say we're going to do it my way because I'm CEO and I have to play the CEO card, that's the moment I want you to take the CEO card away, because I shouldn't need to play the CEO card. I should be a good enough person and a good enough leader and a good enough at deploying these types of styles to advocate for what's best for NLU, even if and when people disagree. And sometimes there's agree to disagree. And at the end of the day, and I say this all the time to my team, this will be the last piece on leadership. I say, I want all of your ideas. We take ideas from our community. We take ideas from our listeners. We take ideas from the team. And sometimes I have to say, listen, you're going to give feedback and I appreciate it. I want 360-degree feedback just like anyone else. And I'm going to give you feedback. You give me feedback. Businesses and families and human beings are built on feedback, open feedback loops. But here's the thing, just because you have an idea doesn't mean I'm going to do it, because at the end of the day, I have to be responsible for the outcome, and I have to trust sometimes that I know better for what's best for us, because maybe I can see more clearly, maybe I can see farther out. And at the end of the day, I'm the one who's going to pay for it more dearly if we make a poor choice. And so it's that weird duality. And I think I'm reading a book right now called The Paradox of Leadership, The 8 Paradoxes of Leadership. And I like it because it's an 8 and it's kind of like an infinity symbol, which I think is cool. But everything in leadership's a paradox because, well, you have to give feedback to people, but you also have to take it. And you're the CEO, so you're the boss, but you also can't act like the boss. See how everything is so paradoxical? If you think you're the boss, you shouldn't be the boss. If you think you're humble, you're not. If you think you're not very humble and you think you're arrogant like I do, you're
The
probably pretty
narcissist
humble.
doesn't think he's a narcissist.
Exactly. And so everything's very paradoxical. And I get why all of us struggle in life, because most things in life are very paradoxical. Like if you think you're really hardworking, you're probably not, because the most hardworking people I know don't actually think they're hardworking. And there's some people who are lazy as it gets who think they are so hardworking. And it's just super paradoxical.
Have you successfully used these leadership techniques in your marriage? Because I think that's kind of a leadership area as well. I think depending on your family structure and how, whether it's man, woman, child traditionally, like I have, or who takes the leadership role. And so I'm kind of curious because I think very similar, right?
So the first thing, because integrity and honesty is my everything, candor is one of my top 3 core values, which is a deep belief in honesty. So we're not married yet.
Okay.
So Emilia and I, we met 5 years ago, and I always call her my future wife. And people always say, "Oh, congratulations!" And I say, "Well, we're not engaged yet, but we've talked about it. We have a 10-year plan, we have a 20-year plan, we have a 30-year plan. We're future visionaries." So to me, I already see her as my wife, but we haven't taken that step technically yet. But anyways, we're planning on it, and it's all good. And I'm a hopeless romantic who will be surprising her. So she doesn't know the day, but she knows it's coming. But anyways, so we're not married yet, number 1. Number 2, leadership is that duality too. Who's the leader in our relationship? It depends. The leader has, this is the best way I understand leadership. Number 1, the leader has to have the biggest vision, the most self-belief, the most competence, the most courage, and the most awareness. So for example, when it comes to our pets, we have 2 cats and a dog. T3, Tucker Tilly Tau. So Tucker, Bush Tucker Wolf, Tiger Nala Lily, and Tauriel de Fari.
Wow.
So yeah, and there's actually more than that, believe it or not. But anyways, so Tucker Tilly Tau, to make it simple. And she's much more aware than I am with how to lead them. And so she, every now and then, she has higher standards than I do. She'll have to say, "Alan, I need you to come up. I need you to train them. I need you to," that kind of thing. Whereas in business, I have higher standards, not by much, but I certainly do. And so I have to lead. And so this is the lesson. Whoever has higher goals, let me go all the way to the deepest layer. Whoever has higher self-belief will have higher goals. Whoever has higher goals will have to have higher standards. And whoever has higher standards will be the most competent and the most aware. And so Emilia and I think of it like an infinity symbol. She gives me feedback where she has higher standards, and I give her feedback where I have higher standards. So for me, the higher standards for me are sleep, fitness, business, finance, math, physics, chemistry, most of the math and science. I call it STEMBIF: science, technology, engineering, mathematics, business, and finance. Those are, I have the higher standards. And then everything that has to do with emotional intelligence, inner work, internal family systems, all the different modalities of therapy. I mean, she's been doing therapy since she was 12.
Oh,
So, and I just started in my 30s. I always joke, guys can't even ask for directions, never mind get a therapist, right?
right.
So she leads that and I lead my thing, and we are a team, and the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And we actually have a business called the We, where it's a pyramid is the logo, and it's got the two me's, and then the we is the diamond in the center, which is bigger and brighter than
Mhm.
the individual. So yes, I use leadership principles in my relationship. I almost said marriage in my relationship every day. And sometimes she's leading me, sometimes I'm leading her, probably her leading me more, most likely. Even though it might not look that way on the surface, you know?
I've never really looked at it that way, but yeah, that is definitely the kind of infinity and feedback thing definitely makes sense. And, I can relate it to my own marriage of definitely my wife is the leader in some situations, and there's other times I'm the leader, and sometimes I'm just the participatory leader and do what
Yeah.
she says and do what she
Yeah.
asks. But, being that you definitely have the higher standards with the STEM stuff and you went to engineering school and you're very analytical, mathematical, starting NLU and you guys deciding to take this holistic approach to self-improvement through health, wealth, and love. Being so analytical, how did you decide what have you always kind of been interested in holistic stuff? Is that kind of the yin yang of Alan that you've always kind of been into woo woo stuff? Or was it something maybe you picked up along the way in your journey, or did Kevin have any influence on you? Or, because that can make a whole sort of difference in deciding to be the CEO of a company who only uses a methodical approach versus a holistic kind of approach.
Yeah, that goes deep. The again, hindsight's 2020, so most of what we've talked about on this show I didn't understand at the time, well, at least not fully, and maybe I still don't, but I understand it better than I used to for sure. So my answer to that would be my mom always pushed me to be well-rounded, and I think that helped, but it also hurt. So if I could go back in time, I would tell my younger self a lot of things. And one of them would be drink less, read more. You're different. You always have been. You always will be. Own it. Have courage to stand up for yourself. But one of the things that I find fascinating is this weird duality between, I used to not have the courage to share this stuff, but I'm going to now. So there's this book called The Hidden Habits of Genius. And it's a Yale professor who was the professor of a genius class studying geniuses in history for 30 years. And he wrote this book called The Hidden Habits of Genius. It's actually behind me. And it took me until I think I didn't read this book until I was 32, 33, something like that. I often joke, I say I'm hoping to hit puberty at 36. So I'm 35 looking 12 still. So it's good. But anyways, so this book blew my mind because the very beginning of the book, and I'm paraphrasing, says something along the lines of geniuses have no idea they're geniuses. They're too busy doing genius shit. So it takes someone who's not a genius to study geniuses and to show you how they operate. Now, I had no idea I was a genius, but I think deep down I always knew I was different. And I'm scared to be a self-proclaimed genius, by the way. So I'm just going to be vulnerable about that. The truth of the matter is I had two huge advantages in life. And believe it or not, I've analyzed my past upside down and sideways, and honestly, not much more than two. Number one, I was born in a country that is free,
Mhm.
that is currently the largest economy in the world and has been for my entire life, and believes in something called equal opportunity. So I got scholarships and financial aid, and I got to get a great education because my country invested in me. And yes, I earned that through merit. They don't just invest in anyone. But at the end of the day, I wouldn't be where I am if it wasn't for that. And that's why I'm trying so hard to help people who are willing to work, build bigger, better, brighter futures, because my future was not looking bright and my present and my past was not looking bright at all. And so fortunately, I was born in a free country that believes in equal opportunity. Okay, that's number one. Number two, I have this brain that is just unreasonable. And I knew it when I was a kid. I went through phases, right? As a kid, I remember thinking, like, why am I better than everyone else at stuff? I don't understand. It doesn't make any sense. But I knew it. I always knew I was like better than everyone at stuff. Not everyone, but most people. And then you kind of get ostracized for that. and people don't like you because people feel insecure. They don't like being less than. And so Kev has this great quote. He said, you are either afraid, there's two biggest fears. The deepest fears at our core is you are either afraid that all of you is not enough, or you are afraid that all of you is too much. Some people have both, but we all swing on one end of that pendulum. I don't have any of the first one. I'm not afraid to not be enough at all. I don't struggle with self-doubt. I feel like most things I'm capable of. I'm not going to win a strongman competition. I'm not going to beat LeBron James at basketball. But at the end of the day, most things are open to me. And they always kind of have been too, which I've been realizing, is it because I believe in myself, or do I believe in myself because of that? That's been a weird thing for me. So if you're out there watching or listening to this, ask yourself the question, are you afraid that all of you is not enough? Or are you afraid that all of you is too much? I'm the second one. I'm deeply fearful that all of me is too much for other people. If you are insecure about not being enough and you get around me, I'll be insecure that you're insecure, and then I'll get all weird and you'll kind of hate me, and then I'll feel unlovable, and then that'll make me even more unlikable because I'll puff up. It'll be this whole thing. So I never knew any of this was happening. This was all just automatic, and I just never felt like a likable person. And I think that the reason I'm unlikable is twofold. Number one, trauma from my past that I hadn't healed from. And number two, I'm just statistically very different. And a lot of people are deeply insecure about their being in the middle of the bell curve. I'm not in the middle of almost any bell curves, and I now understand that. Okay, so to bring this back to your original question, if you're wrong about one thing, you're wrong about everything. And I was wrong about a lot of things, everything, because I was wrong about me. When you're a kid, you know you're different, but you don't know how different, and you don't fully understand that you're different because everyone's mirroring you. And so I grew up in a world where everyone believed in themselves, seemingly, right? In hindsight, I realized they didn't at all. They were mirroring me. And everyone had goals and dreams, and everyone works hard, and everyone wants to achieve their goals and dreams, and everyone intends on doing great things in the world. And the truth is, all of them are mirroring me. And now I realize, in hindsight, looking at my past and where everyone ended up and all that, I now realize that most people were talking and they weren't calculating. And so my brain is able to calculate outcomes in advance. I'm able to project. There's this study they did where they hooked people up to fMRIs, and they had you imagine your future, and most people could only imagine a stranger. And if you have this skill of projection with your brain, you can imagine yourself, and then you can reverse engineer that finish line. So I'm not hoping to end up in a good place. And I think that if it wasn't for my ability to project, I probably wouldn't have made it out of where I grew up, because where I grew up was a lot of adversity. I lost my father when I was 2. My stepfather left when I was 14. The McCorkle family, the Lazaros family, and my mom's side of the family, all by the time I'm 14 years old, essentially, when we were the Lazaroses, my real last name is McCorkle, by the way.
Okay.
When my father passed away, we didn't really talk to the McCorkles much because we were the Lazaroses when my stepdad came into the picture. And then when my stepdad left, my mom got in a fight with her sister, and we got kind of ostracized from her side of the family, the Higgins side. And so I kind of lost 3 families by the time I'm 14. And fortunately for me, I believed in myself. And so my trauma response was work harder, get smarter, aim higher. And that is what got me here. And so, yeah, I've forgotten what your original question was, but hopefully that added some value.
Yeah. How did you get to the holistic approach? Because you're so methodical. If you guys use that holistic approach, where did you run into kind of holistic, and where did you get it from? Was it in the journey, or was it influenced by, whether it's Kevin, previous business partners, previous, students in your cohort? How did that happen? What got you into holistic, being such a strong science and math person?
I now realize where we were going with that. So my mother, I don't know if she did this intuitively. I don't know if this was good or bad for me in hindsight, but I do know that she always wanted me to be well-rounded, which I actually think in some ways was a mistake, to be honest. I asked her recently, we were on a walk, and I said, what was different about me? Did you notice? And she said, well, you've always been different. I'm like, I want some details. Like, give me more. Did you notice? And she said, I wanted you to be well-rounded. So here's what I think happened. I think in my mom's desire for me to be well-rounded, I think that she unconsciously put me around people I probably shouldn't have been around. And I think that through that social adversity, I became this chameleon who now learned how to lead. So most computer engineers are awkward and weird and introverted, and they don't know how to talk well. statistically speaking. And so I would say that I'm a well-rounded computer engineer who has learned how to be holistic out of necessity, not necessarily out of desire.
Hmm.
And I'm not convinced that that was the best path. As a matter of fact, I'm very lucky I made it out of a lot of that, to be honest. But what I will say is it's had its advantages, and everything has its pros and cons. And so, and yes, Kevin and I both grew up without fathers. Kev is the polar opposite of me in many ways. He struggles with self-doubt all the time. He has struggle with self-belief, but we both had low self-worth. And so we had complementary skill sets.
Mhm.
We definitely have different modalities of thinking. Mine's mostly numbers, his is mostly words and concepts. And we just leveled each other out and got along long enough, and we had similar core values. So that's the thing. We have different core competencies, different modalities of thinking, different views of the world, different views of ourselves, but we have a common mission, we have a common core values, and we really have a common wound, which is low self-worth from not having a dad. And so I think my desire to be holistic is coupled with the pain of wanting a father figure or a male role model who actually walked their talk
Mhm.
and who really was holistic. Because maybe this is a me thing, I think it is. I can't stand, I mean, even John Maxwell. I love John Maxwell's work, but why aren't you in shape? Like
Mm.
you literally wrote the book on how to maximize your potential, but yet you've never been in shape. And again, a lot of people will think, well, are you fat shaming? Are you toxic? I'm just being honest. I don't understand. I don't understand how you can write a book on the 15 invaluable laws of growth and maximizing your potential and then never exercise. For me, I just can't have it. I think we set a low bar. I think we set a low standard, and I've always been a little bit upset by that. And fortunately, I've turned that pain into self-belief and drive, and I want to lead by example. And so you'll never hear me talk about something that I'm not currently practicing.
Mhm.
You'll never hear me talk about fitness while not being fit. You'll never hear me talk about writing when I'm not writing. And that's why we haven't talked about fatherhood. I'm not a father yet. Right. So I lead by example. I won't talk about it unless I'm walking it in my real life. And I don't mean when people are watching, I mean when no one's watching.
Yeah, I thought that follow-up question I kind of had in my outline for the listeners was, why not just focus on one? But it's in listening to the beginning of when we were talking earlier and understanding that you had that high salary, but there was still something missing. Fundamentally, you knew it. Whether or not you could identify it at the time, you knew that, hey, one piece of the puzzle is just not enough. Even if it's the main piece, because so many people strive. They think that financial will cure everything. If they make the right amount of money, that's to cure the all. But it's I guess been shown that it's truly not. That you need a lot more for fulfillment than just money. Now, in
Yeah,
reading
you
your
can't build a vision with one puzzle piece, right? You ever do a puzzle where the front cover? Yeah, no one puzzle piece can build the whole vision. I think that's a cool. Well said. Well said, Richard.
Now, I had read something in your profile about. I had a question. What's the difference between peak performance and optimization? Because I know that was kind of some lingo that you guys use and talk about, and to me, they almost seem similar, or maybe kind of like the consistency versus sustainability. So, what's the peak performance versus optimization?
Yeah, the consistency versus sustainability. These are I love words and concepts, and I can't pretend that I'm a good words and concepts guy in comparison to some people. My girlfriend is so much better at words and concepts than me, but for me, it's math and science all the way. That said, I've worked really hard. I used to think I was a strong communicator, and now I say I think I'm a strong communicator to engineers.
Hey, this is Hunter from the Everything's Connected podcast. Are you feeling drained? If you're searching for ways to manage stress and find a little more peace, the Podcast Connection Network is here for you. We've got amazing shows on mental health, mindfulness, and all kinds of ways to live a happier, healthier life. Check out the link in the episode's description.
So, because they have the same modality of thinking as I do, so of course I am, right? But so to answer your question about optimization versus peak performance, I'll explain each individually and then I'll show you how they're connected, at least from my understanding. Peak performance is the optimal stopping problem, which is you're driving to a concert, and the closer you get to the venue, the less likely there is a parking spot. But you don't want to walk 2 miles to the concert. So when do you park?
Mm.
That's called an optimal stopping problem. Everything in life is an optimal stopping problem. When we talked earlier about do the right thing in the right way, in the right amount, at the right time, with the right people, that's really what I'm saying is too much, too little. Goldilocks. What's the right amount? And it changes based on the circumstance and the context and the goal and the individual, right? So what is the right amount of work? It's so funny. People say, well, you need to work harder. Okay, that advice is good for some people, terrible for others. Most people say, Alan, you think too much, you work too hard. For your goals, maybe. But for my goals, I actually don't work hard enough, but you can't know that. So you're just projecting, right? And so an optimal stopping problem, which is optimization, and peak performance are very similar. Peak performance means you are picture a graph with an upside down horseshoe. We all know max and min. The max point is, and on the graph, the x-axis, imagine 0 is too little, 10 is too much, and you're trying to find 5. 5 is the max point of the horseshoe. And so when I asked you the duration of this podcast episode, the reason I asked that is because there's an optimal stopping problem. If we're here for 4 hours, it's too much. But if we're here for 4 minutes, it's too little. I can't add any value. So what is the optimal amount? You said anywhere from 50 minutes to like an hour and 50, and you'll decide in real time where to cut it. And you're the host, and that's your responsibility. But peak performance means that I'm ready to perform optimally within the given window. But then this complexifies because of game theory. There's infinite games and finite games. So an infinite game is I want to be the best podcaster I can be. A finite game is this podcast episode. Okay, so that's peak performance. How do you stay at your peak? Get good sleep, hydrate, eat well. What does well even mean, right? So you can go layer, 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 layer. So the world is very complex, but it's simple fundamentals that it's governed by. And so even that's a duality. I don't want to break anyone's brain right now. All right, and then you've got optimization. Optimize is one of our core values. Emilia and I have 3 core values written above our kitchen in these like big letters, and they're actually really nice. She bought them, and I hung them up because I wanted to make sure they were perfectly hung up. Optimize, align, and erudite. Optimize, so erudite means knowledge, wisdom, accumulated science, understanding. Align means you have a goal, you have core values, you have core beliefs. Are you aligned with that goal, with those values, with your beliefs? And then optimize means efficiency and effectiveness. So for example, when I go to the gym right now, I'm in a cut. We're doing a 10 pound and 10-week challenge that I know you. I am at 189.6 as of yesterday. No, 188.6 as of yesterday. And I need to get to 185 by August 10th. So I have plenty of time. So I'm actually ahead of schedule. Because I'm ahead of schedule, now I'm able to eat a little more. I can optimize my meals. What am I optimizing for? This is one of my favorite questions in the world. What am I optimizing for? So right now I'm optimizing for this podcast episode, and I'm optimizing for the question that you asked. But you better believe if Emilia's hurt, I'm going to stop optimizing for any of that. I'm going to leave and go help her. I'm going to optimize for her well-being. And so there's this interdisciplinary optimization that's always happening. You can only always have one primary focus. You can only ever have one priority at a time. And so what is your priority at the time based on what you're optimizing for? So in the 10 pound and 10-week challenge, I'm not optimizing for muscle mass. I'm optimizing for weight loss. Why am I optimizing for weight loss? Because if I lose weight, I'll burn fat. Not 100% fat. I'll burn muscle too, but I'm optimizing for fat loss. I get why most people don't achieve their goals. I really do, because it is the most complex thing ever, and it takes a lifetime to learn it. And then by the time you're old and you finally figured it out, now you don't have the energy necessarily to like actually implement it. Not to mention, most things that we achieve in life take a long time. They don't take 2 weeks. And so you got to consistently learn, grow, adapt, evolve, understand, rinse, repeat, fail, try again, fail better, try again, fail better, try again, fail better. And so, yeah, that's the difference between peak performance and optimization. Peak performance is what is the optimal choice in that too much, too little equation of optimal stopping. When do you park the car in the concert? Optimization is what are you optimizing for? Are you optimizing for the concert? Or are you optimizing for getting drunk? Are you optimizing for fun with your partner? Are you optimizing for love? Are you optimizing for the overall experience? What are you optimizing for? And if you ask yourself that simple question, you might be like, oh, I've been optimizing for fun my whole life, and that's why my career sucks. Or I've been optimizing for my career my whole life, and that's why I'm not fulfilled. And I'm a workaholic or whatever it is. Most optimization is unconscious.
Yeah, it's interesting, kind of that concept. And, like you had said, some of the things they're so complex, yet so simple. And I think, one of my, I would say, positive skill sets as a leader was, especially in terms of project management, was to be able, you're presented with a project and there's all these pieces. And my thing was all the pieces are almost too much at first. Like it's good for a general outline, but kind of like I do before we start recording, but it's also about I'm break it down first things first. Where's the starting point? Let's keep it simple. And then we can kind of, optimize as the project goes on for those different times. But because for me, I'll suffer from analysis paralysis if I get overwhelmed by too much information or you're trying to do too much. And I kind of like what you said about you can really kind of only focus one thing at a time, have one priority at a time. Next to you guys, another podcast I listen to is Mindset Mentor with Rob Dial. And
Nice.
a lot of it is talking about, those 25-minute increments of whether you put on binaural beats, work towards one thing, take a little break, work towards it again, get the one thing done.
The Pomodoro technique.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, I always forget it, but I won't forget it now because I used to cook and
Isn't
that's
it
a type
based
of
on a
pasta
tomato
sauce.
or something like
Yes,
that? Yeah,
Pomodoro
yeah,
sauce.
yeah. Pomodoro
Yeah.
sauce. Yeah.
So yeah, at 47, it's taken me this long, a layoff, going through and kind of learning about myself to understand all these things and put them into practice and understand where I'm strong and where I'm not. And of course, some of it too in the podcast game is I've had to learn. I've had to sit down and learn to edit and do different things and skills that I never had. But it's been fun because I'm definitely a lifelong learner. We're talking about a lot of complex things, and with your many different roles and the many projects you guys do, you guys have a podcast, you have social media, you have meetings, both in person and Zoom meetings that people will learn about as they investigate and know you a little bit more. But how do you stay aligned when you get overwhelmed, and what does overwhelmed to you feel like?
Yeah.
How do you know you're overwhelmed or, what? And that's why I say, what does it feel like to you? Because I think it feels different to everybody.
That's such a thing. Great questions. This has been awesome, man. I really appreciate it. And you're helping me learn and grow too, because I haven't had to answer questions like this before. So this is good. I love the long form because you get a chance to actually dig into some of the real stuff. So I have two answers and I'll probably go three different directions. It'll be a whole thing, but I'm in a perpetual state of overwhelm, but not necessarily detrimental.
Right.
So there's constructive and destructive. There's eustress and distress. And distress is the stress that decays you and hurts you and crumbles you. The eustress is the stress that helps you grow, helps you get smarter and stronger. And if you have too much of anything, again, going back to the optimal stopping problem, too much of anything, you go from constructive to destructive, and too little, it actually becomes destructive as well. But that depends on the individual. So the analogy is fitness. If you go to the gym and you squat 100 pounds and that's easy, you need to up the weight. If it's too hard, you're going to injure yourself. But then weeks later, if you're consistent, you might be able to do 120, then 140, then 160. So you have to keep upping the ante in order to keep getting smarter and stronger and better.
Yeah.
But if you up the ante too much and too quickly, frequency, intensity, density, duration, you're going to injure yourself and then you'll be out of the gym altogether. And so the truth is I'm in a perpetual state of overwhelm, but I think it's the optimal amount, but of course I would, and I'm biased, right? So I'm always trying to stay just far enough outside my comfort zone to where I'm stretching, but not so far where I'm snapping.
Yeah. I call it bend without breaking.
Nice. Okay, beautiful. So here's the problem. If you're, let's say, well, I'll use numbers. So let's say 10 is you're going to get injured. 5 is optimal, and 0 is you're completely in your comfort zone. You're not growing, you're not learning, you're not getting smarter or stronger. If you're at a 10, you're in trouble and you're going to get injured. If you're at a 5, that's great. If you're at a 0, you're not growing. Now, if you're at 5 and then all of a sudden life happens, now all of a sudden you're at a 9. And then what if when it rains, it pours, and now the 9 gets kicked to a 12? Now you get injured and now you're down and out for a whole weekend. The problem with life is that it's all expand, contract, expand, contract. I use the airplane analogy. The airplane starts getting momentum. You start a new regiment, you start new habits, you're tracking habits, you're doing it, you're rocking and rolling, let's go. Peak performance optimization. I'm on fire. I listen to the podcast, we're doing it. And all of a sudden you get momentum and you're like, this is good, awesome. Okay. And then all of a sudden you hit some resistance, some challenges. And when the plane hits resistance, it starts to elevate, and you get higher and higher and higher, and you're doing it. You're like, okay, this is hard, but it's working. This is hard, but it's working. The problem is you reach new heights. And when you reach new heights, you lose focus. I had a business client way back who made $450,000 in a single week. And it was when the crypto space was blowing up, NFTs, all that. And all of a sudden he went from a no-name to someone who was very well known in the industry, who all of a sudden has supermodels reaching out to him. The problem with elevating in life is a lot of times shiny objects try to get you.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden you lose focus on the things that actually got you the elevation. And so, for example, we're more successful than we've ever been. We're at the next level. But in order to get to the next level, we're going to have to stay focused on the fundamentals that got us here, but we're going to have to up the ante. And then when we get to the next level, we're going to have opportunities we never had before. And if we lose focus by chasing shiny objects, the plane's going to start nosediving. And by the time the nosedive is happening, it's very hard to pull that thing up because you're just on your way to crash and burn. And so usually by the time you realize that you're nosediving, usually it's hard. You don't have enough time to get it back. So what happens is the Phoenix burns all the way down, the plane crashes, and your ego crashes with it, and you eat all the humble pie at once. And then you rinse and repeat. Hopefully, after each crash, metaphorically,
Mm-hmm.
the old ego dies, the best version of you comes back into momentum to a new runway with a new plane on a new mission with new goals. And hopefully that you climb even higher than you did last time. Now, if you're really smart, you'll recognize the nosedive in advance. You'll eat the humble pie in advance. Oh, I wish I was good at that. I wish I was better at eating the humble
Takes
pie in
practice.
advance. Yeah, it takes practice. And as you get older and wiser, hopefully you realize what's happening here. And then you can, get the plane back up. But the truth is, the plane's going to nosedive for at least a couple weeks, most likely, if not years, before you actually realize that your marriage isn't working or whatever it is. And so what you do to prevent that is you measure. So we have a check-in. We have on our whiteboard downstairs, we have check-ins every week. And the check-in is something we call the permission question, Emilia and I, which is what's something about you, me, my character, or our relationship or our life that's been bothering you lately that you wish didn't, but it still sort of does. And this is the permission question because now she has permission to give me feedback so I
Right.
can see whether or not the plane is nosediving. And if it is, and I get the feedback, it's like, oh, I had no idea that was bothering you. Okay, let's take corrective action. And so the only way to take corrective action is to get the data. But the only way to get the data is to have courage to ask the question. And then
Or
once you get the
courage to
data,
receive the answer.
exactly, right? And then if you receive the answer, now what do you do about it? I get why 90% of failure in life is just pure neglect. It's just pure neglect out of fear. You're afraid of the feedback. You're afraid to look at your bank account. You're afraid to look at your credit card statement. You're afraid to do your taxes. You're afraid, and everyone is, by the way, everyone is. You're afraid to ask the question. You're afraid to bring it up. You're afraid. I think 90% of life success in life and fulfillment is courage. And the reason why is because the biggest bottleneck is fear. And we don't want to admit we're afraid. So we get all macho. When in reality, if we just said, listen, I'm afraid to say this and I'm going to say it anyway. I'm afraid to ask this and I'm going to ask it anyway. I'm afraid that I'm going to fail or I'm going to look stupid or I'm going to be embarrassed or whatever. And you just say, okay, I'm going to be vulnerable and I might fail and I might look stupid and I might ask a dumb question. I might get embarrassed. I might lose credibility. People might dislike me. People might hate me. People might think I'm arrogant. Whatever it is, whatever your fear is, just admit that it's fear. Inject the courage, be vulnerable and humble, and just try your best anyway. And if you do that, usually it'll go better than you think, because most fear is in your head, not all of it, most of it. And you're going to grow and you're going to learn and you're going to get feedback you never got. And then you're going to get smarter and you're going to get stronger and you're going to get more capable. But a lot of this comes down to self-belief and self-worth, because if you don't have self-belief and self-worth, you most likely won't have courage. And because you don't have a strong enough foundation to handle the humble pie that's going to come.
I love that. It gives me like that insight to your, NLU, the business side of it, your titles, what you take care of, that math and science methodical approach, but the concept, the word courage, the meaning of it, is for you to say, hey, I think 90% of success in life is courage, but then having self-worth, having self-belief. Because, for me, since last July, I've been kind of on a weight loss journey, the podcast journey. It's all kind of gone together, a sense of improvement, if you will. But for me, I didn't choose anything for a New Year's resolution. I chose the word consistency, a concept.
Nice.
So it was very
Nice.
similar to that courage of going, hey, no matter what it is, I'm playing the long, slow game built of consistency. If I keep, I don't need to be perfect every day. I'm still going to have McDonald's because I have a 10-year-old daughter. I'm still going to do this, but as
And
long
because it's
as,
delicious, let's be
yes,
honest.
but if I get movement in and exercise more days than not, if I make better decisions more days than not, that consistency will help. That's going to be the key to success. And, that was one of the last things Kevin and I talked about was consistency versus sustainability.
Nice.
Because I had told him the similar thing, which was, that I chose consistency. So I thought that that was very interesting that,
Well, you're 44 episodes in. Strong
yeah.
work. I researched. Way to go. Way to go. Keep it up. Keep
My
it up.
goal is to get to 100. That's the next
Nice.
marker. And so I moved up to 2 a week and may even throw in a few third bonus episodes
Nice.
here and there. But what's we've discussed a lot how you're methodical and kind of the holistic approach and NLU. And so I know you had a vision because you're that kind of person of if I do X and Y, then Z should occur. You started this journey, you started this business, and you expected certain things, certain benefits. As you were striving towards $1 million and 1 million listens, which congratulations.
Thank you.
But what were some unintended benefits and fulfillment that you got that you didn't see at the beginning of this journey?
Yeah, awesome question. So the first one's Emilia. So Emilia was a listener. She wasn't. So she was close friends with one of my clients.
Mhm.
And she's now business partners with her. So her name's Bianca. She's still a client, actually. As a matter of fact, I have a call with her tomorrow. Bianca recommended to Emilia to listen to our show, which was back then called the Hyperconscious Podcast.
Mhm.
We rebranded to Next Level University around 400 or 500 episodes in. I honestly don't know the real number. It was a couple years in. Okay. We lost a lot of momentum when we rebranded, by the way. So careful of your rebrands. Do them right, do them well. We lost so many listeners. But anyways, the unintended thing. So I talked with Kev often and we playfully joke because a lot of this is beyond his wildest dreams.
Right.
And the truth is, and as arrogant as this might sound, none of this was unanticipated in terms of the business.
Right.
One thing that I will say was unanticipated is Emilia. Holy crap. That is by far better than I ever could have imagined, genuinely. And the team. I mean, the team is just magnificent. And so now I understand goals and success were natural for me. Relationships never were. For Kev, relationships were natural for him, and goals and success were not. And so, of course, the goals and dreams of the business and all that, Kevin's blown away, but he never had any doubt about him and Taryn, and the team and all that stuff isn't the thing for him. He thinks it's great and he loves it, but it's not. He always knew he'd have great friendships. He always knew he'd have a great relationship, that kind of thing. And I was the opposite. And so Emilia was a listener because my client recommended the show, and she recommended an episode a while back called Service versus Selfishness was the name of the episode. And we tried to unpack how to find the optimal stopping problem, even though that wasn't our verbiage back then, between how do you serve yourself versus serving others.
Mhm.
And Kevin and I recorded the whole episode, and it was the one time, we laugh now, where I understood the listener better than he did. And this is before Emilia and I had ever met. And so I was so upset with him that we had to re-record the whole episode. I'm like, you don't get her. You don't know what she's asking, all this stuff. And this is now it makes perfect sense because she's also brilliant and just a genius and very different than our typical listener. Not that our listeners aren't very
Mhm.
bright. But she and I are kindred spirits. And so I didn't know that. It's very cute. So anyways, fast forward, redo the episode. And then I finally have the courage to DM her. I playfully joke and I say I unsent 3 different DMs asking true or false, do you have a boyfriend? Because on Facebook it said in a relationship, but there was no guys and it didn't say a name. And I had never seen any guys in any of the photos. So eventually I DM'd her and I said, true or false, are you in a relationship? And she said, yes, a relationship with myself.
Oh,
And after that, we were literally storybook inseparable. And now we have a podcast together and we have a business together and all this stuff. And it's awesome. And it's the best thing ever. So to answer your question in short form, my relationship with Emilia that would never have happened had I not started this business and been on this journey and switched from corporate to my own thing and really gone on this mission to help empower bigger, better, brighter futures. I never would have met Emilia. And Emilia, without question, is the greatest gift of my entire life. I mean, she is just the best human being I've ever met. And her and I are, it's just beyond what I ever thought was possible. Truly, I would not have believed me. Like if I could talk to my younger self and try
uh-huh.
to explain how good this is, my younger self would say, bullshit, no chance. And I used to say soulmates. I don't know all that stuff. Yeah, 100%, 100% soulmates. And she's my best friend. She's my fitness partner. She's my coach. She's my mentee. She's my mentor. She's my everything. And I used to think quotes like that were garbage because I was a math brain who was like, yeah, okay, 8 billion people, you have one soulmate. Yeah. So now
Yeah.
I understand and realize that I was ignorant.
I love that. I love, you know what I love about it the most is it's kind of one of those things of it's part of the podcast, part of my mission is to let other people know, hey, they're not alone or they're not crazy or, if they think like, hey, I'm crazy for thinking this or crazy thinking that I could ever be successful doing XYZ, taking that chance, taking that leap. And I asked that question because it's indicative of when you do have that courage and you get that self-worth, you go out on a limb and you do the work. You do the things that you know will move the needle some way. But I love when people are able to say, I took that chance and it turned out 10 times better than I ever could have imagined. Not in a million years did I ever think I would have this because of this. And it all started because of a chance. And part of me starting a podcast was, well, one, I needed something to do and needed a direction and needed to focus on something. But the other part of it was taking a chance. I joke, what qualifies me to have a podcast other than I listened to a lot of them while I was doing Uber Eats after I got laid
Nice.
off.
Nice.
That's not really being an expert, but still taking the chance and being all the episodes in and having these wonderful conversations, getting to impact people, after being in healthcare for 12 years, people are still at the core of my heart, my soul, my mission as a person to just help others and leave the world a better place.
Mhm.
And conversation is just happens to be a way to do it at the moment. But, last question kind of is what have you learned about self-improvement in this journey and having kind of a self-improvement company? What have you learned about it that will help improve the industry? What's one thing?
Okay, well, the first thing that came to mind was actually a playful joke that I now feel called to say because I think it'll be funny. I think trying to sell self-improvement is a lot like trying to clout your own eyes. The truth is most people in life are looking for the quick fix. That's just the reality. And self-improvement is anything but that. There is no 6-minute abs. There is no quick fix. There is no way to avoid pain or suffering. There is no way to avoid work. There is no way to avoid feedback and feel good about yourself every day. It's just not real. So what have I learned starting a self-improvement company? It's a duality. Our mission is to create to build the most successful holistic self-improvement company in history. And in a weird way, while I know that that's possible, I also know that it's this weird duality of I know we can make change in the world and I know we can change the world in our own unique way. I think in some ways we're doing that now, just not at the level we're going to later, right? And I do
Right.
believe in the impact. I used to say I want self-improvement to spread like COVID. I stopped saying that because Kev said it's insensitive, and I think that's probably true. Although now I'm still saying it, but I'm adding the empathy piece to it. And by still saying it, I mean just now. I don't usually say it anymore. But I do want self-improvement to spread like COVID. I do want us all to sweep our own porch and the whole world will be cleaner.
Yes.
I do think personal responsibility and self-belief and self-worth and worthy goals and meaningful progress towards meaningful goals is the solution for the world to be a better place, because that's where fulfillment lives. And I don't think fulfilled people hurt people. I think
Agreed.
fulfilled people want to see other people fulfilled and they want to do
Yeah.
right. And
I had an
it's
episode of why do people who are fulfilled have that desire to want to help others, you know?
Yeah, and it's ironic too because the more you help people, the more fulfilled you are, and then the more you want to help people. So it's
Yeah.
a really positive cycle. It's really nice. But anyway, so what have I learned from a self-improvement company? It's the duality between we can change the world and the world's not going to change. It's this weird paradox where most people do not care about self-improvement, and they never will. And I just have to wake up to that truth. But ironically and paradoxically, the moment I own that, some people have come around that I never thought would. It's almost like I accept the world for the way it is versus the delusion I used to wish it was. And for some reason, that allows you to actually make positive change. Is my mom going to change? Is my aunt going to change? Is my sister going to change? Are they all suddenly going to love self-improvement? I don't know. Probably not. But ironically, when I owned that and accepted that truth, that hard reality, believe it or not, they've actually started getting into it a little bit. So who knows? Who knows? What I've learned is most people are not into self-improvement currently. A lot of people who think they're into it are actually more talk than walk. The industry is way worse than I thought. Like, I was naive. I thought everybody wasn't full of it, and I thought everybody was virtuous and didn't lie. And I mean, the industry is just a mess. It's really alarming. I mean, I've coached people at the top. I've been coached by people at the top. I've won billionaires, several multimillionaires, and a large percentage of the self-improvement space is full of shit. And that is the truth. But despite that, I think that we can change one heart-driven human at a time. I think that everything that we do to try to make a better world is worth it. And I think that it's going to be awesome. And so, yeah, in a nutshell, self-improvement is not ubiquitous at all, not nearly as much as what Instagram might make you think. But I think it's progressing in the positive direction. I do, even though it's not nearly enough.
Who doesn't want to improve their self? I had to ask myself that question when you were like, I realize everybody's not into it. And I sat there and I go, who wouldn't want to improve? But then I realized as I thought it through for a second, I was like, maybe it's just their definition of self-improvement. Your definition, your standards are so much different. And somebody, as you described that population of less educated having more kids, their idea of self-improvement could be anything. Independent living versus living on government assistance. It could be whatever. Is it that who wouldn't want to self-improve? I think everybody wants to self-improve a little bit, but maybe people just aren't clear on the definition, and maybe they're not clear that that means they need to work on themselves. Maybe they think self-improvement is a newer car, a better house, or something like that.
Unfortunately, it's not. Yeah, that's what that
Right.
was my point, is it's not.
Yeah.
And most people are too fearful to look at self because their egos are too big. And truth be told, I was guilty of that too before my car accident. And after my car accident, my existential crisis, my quarter life crisis, I really looked at self. And so before that, I wasn't as self-improvement oriented either. I was improvement oriented, but not self-improvement oriented. So I'm just as guilty.
What age did your car accident happen?
When I was 26.
And had you made the transition from corporate to NLU?
Nope, not until after. Yep, it
So
was after my car accident. And so I would have, if you had said, "Are you into self-improvement?" I would have said, "Of course." No, but I wasn't. I wasn't willing to look at me as much as I am now. My focus was to improve in snowboarding and in video games and in my job. That it was like improving skills, professional development, resume, cover letter, LinkedIn, improve my relationship, improve things externally, but it wasn't self-improvement. I had it backwards. And that's why I do what I do. Is so many people have it backwards. You're trying to improve your car. You work harder on your car and your home than you do on yourself. That is a massive mistake. And I'm calling a spade on that one. That's a mistake. I had mentors that take better care of their Porsche than their own family, and I'm not for that. Now, I'm just as guilty of it before 26. I think I was a really good person. I think I had a heart. I think I wanted to do better, but I think I was misguided in my improvement orientation. And I think self-improvement, holistic self-improvement, is what the world desperately needs, in my honest opinion. And that's what I needed to, and that's what Kevin needed to. So this is not my high horse. This is what I think the solution is for all of us.
do you feel that car accident was necessary now that you look back on it?
For sure. If it wasn't that, it would have been something else that brought radical humility to my life.
And so that was just how much with that, other than the job thing you had mentioned at the beginning, how much percentage wise was that the car accident also a contributing factor to leaving corporate and starting an LU? So
Those are the two.
kind of
So I'd say,
combined.
yeah, if you combine them both, that would be 100% right there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. The car,
So
so I'd say 50-50 on each of those. Yep. Because I
awesome.
always had the deeper why, but the car accident accelerated it.
Well, and that's kind of always, what I say, there's always some sort of little catalyst that makes somebody question a lot of things, like for me
For you,
being
it sounds like it was being laid off, right?
it was, well, because that was the only job ever I've ever been laid off, fired, let go, however you want to phrase it. First time, only time. And so if you go 43 years, and even though I understand it being a business decision, the pandemic and whatnot, the other problem is I understand when you work in healthcare, and I would even argue with what you and Kev do at NLU, people who care for people, I don't think it's what they do. I think it's who they are.
Yeah.
And
Agreed.
therefore, similar with healthcare and NLU and you guys, is that your identity becomes attached to it because it's what you do. It's who you are. It's in your
It's who you
nature.
are.
It's in the fiber of your being.
Yep.
And, that layoff kind of, it crumbled that self-identity. And it might have actually been Kevin in an episode somewhere, or maybe you guys talking of, maybe it was just the wrong identity at that time. Maybe my true self is doing this as a podcaster, and I had no idea. Just like I always say, I've learned it took me a while. It took me at least a year or more after getting laid off and going kind of like you would forgive a relationship breakup. I had to say, I forgive this organization. And I had to look for something that was beneficial. Well, okay. I had ran 2 ambulatory clinics that were multi-million-dollar operations. I had 26 direct reports, 10 physicians and clinicians, all the ancillary staff. They taught me how to run a business. They taught me about project management, and flip that around and go, okay, I'm thankful for it.
Nice.
That forgiveness. And then as it's gone on, I've started that kind of process, opened up more insight to going, okay, remember when you needed a lead nurse for 2 years and how many interviews you conducted? This is what gives me the skills to interview people on a podcast. Starting to appreciate that and learn that. Very, super insightful. And maybe that identity needed to be tore down. And as I've gotten further into the game, and hindsight is 2020, you learn all these things about yourself. Not only that, my first 6 years were spent in a level 1 trauma center. And when you see a lot of bad things, you're moving at such a fast pace that you put it on the bookshelf. And, eventually, after 12 years of both jobs, 6 and 6, like it, an object in motion remains in motion. And it kind of, when the job stopped, everything caught up. And I really had to
work through all that trauma.
yeah, work. And it wasn't just the trauma, but the identity piece, I think, was the hardest piece. And then
Well,
understanding like, hey, I'm still the same person. I still have the same goals. I'm just pursuing it through a different avenue.
Yep, exactly. You reinvented yourself and you transformed yourself. And the truth of the matter is you took pain and frustration and you took the high road and you turned that frustration into fascination and the fascination into transformation. And now you've reinvented yourself and you've reinvented your goals and you've reinvented your mission. And we wouldn't even be here talking if you hadn't. So you can turn these bad things in life, because here's the truth. Like, bad things are going to happen no matter what. You can take something, you can transform them. You can transform them into something constructive, or you can let them destroy you, and you can build ego. You could have built ego instead of, you could have just stayed angry and taken the low road and built an ego of, well, I was laid off and COVID and all that. So good for you for taking the high road. And yeah, you definitely have learned a lot through all that. And I encourage you, again, I'm not going to coach you, but I encourage you to take even more of that and bring it into the show, because there's your credibility right there, my friend.
Well, and I talk about it often, and I'm sure we would maybe have similar views, but I have a master's in public administration, healthcare administration,
Nice.
And people are always like, well, did you, I guess some of the sting for, let's say, family members is you have a master's and you're doing nothing with it now.
Yeah. That's
And
tough. That's
I
tough.
always say, well, the education for me was about the process. It was about moving with a 1-year old, accepting a leadership role, learning how to be a leader
Yep.
while getting my master's, and
Yep.
juggling all these balls at one time showed me what I was capable of doing if I want something and I
Nice.
want to accomplish something. And if you do the work, 15 months later, it will end, but you have to continue to do the work. And then,
Yep.
of course, the real work begins. And that's kind of how I describe
Yeah.
like leveling up. Every time you level up, then the real work begins. Kev, his whole thing was, hey, I was making all this money and this was the best I was going to do because I didn't do like Alan. And, so there's always this education, not education. I always say it's not that you necessarily need it to be successful. People learn different. Education and the process of education is what taught me and gave me some skills to do some of the things I'm doing, to know how business works, to understand P&L and
Hmm.
different things and spreadsheets. How do you feel about education? When you talk to people, if they're like, is a college degree worth it or not? Did you get something out of it as well?
Yeah, definitely. So that's been an interesting thing because again, duality, holding
Hmm.
two seemingly opposing ideas in your consciousness simultaneously. On one end, I'm unbelievably grateful for my education and it is unbelievably powerful. Like reading, writing, mathematics, all of it, all the sciences, psychology. I have this pyramid that I use. The pyramid of the universe is what I call it. And the bottom is mathematics, then it's physics, then it's chemistry, then it's biology, then it's physiology, then it's neuroscience, then it's psychology. And so mathematics is the study of the universe, physics is the study of the physical universe, chemistry is the study of matter, biology is the study of living things, physiology is the study of the human body, neuroscience is the study of the human brain, and then psychology is the study of the human condition. And so if you understand all those, you're in good shape. And then you have the economy and all this other stuff. But if you understand those, you're in good shape. So I think the education system did an awesome job at those. The maths and sciences, I think they do a good job. I really do. When it comes to the fundamental life skills, the emotional intelligence, the effective communication, the trust building, the empathy and vulnerability and humility, the character skills, the personal development, oh, God, they dropped the ball. They dropped the ball so hard on that stuff. Fitness, I mean, come on,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And so at the end of the day, it's a duality. I'm grateful for my education, and I
You're
think
not
that
doing anything with it
yeah,
like me?
exactly right. Yeah, you're funny. I mean, we are right.
Yeah.
So, and not to mention, even if what you learned in college wasn't super applicable, all of it's applicable. We can't go down the rabbit hole because I do got to jump here,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, learning is what underpins everything. I mean, even you and I are on Zoom right now. We're both on cameras and microphones. Human beings had to learn through accumulated wisdom how to build these things. I mean, these things were always possible. We just didn't know how. Education's everything. Education is just everything. And if you are educated, and I mean in the real world through practical and theoretical education, I think you're in a really good spot to make good choices. And if you make good choices, I think you'll put yourself in the higher probability of having a great life. And then if you have a great life, you'll be fulfilled and you'll want to give back. And I think that's how the world changes. Yeah.
All right, Alan. Thanks for joining me today. And I really enjoyed our conversation. And I know the audience is going to enjoy it as well. Do you have any questions for me before you hop off?
No, this was awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciated the questions. I'm here to serve, number one, and number two, to practice my craft. And I got to really do both of those. So thank you. And keep doing what you're doing. 44 episodes in, on the way to 100. Keep it up. The world desperately needs more of this self improvement, personal growth, personal development, professional development. And so I'm cheering for you. And if you ever want help growing your business, you let me know. Okay.
Will do. Awesome, man.
Thank you.
I'll see you next time. Well, that's a wrap. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from. Remember, go out and be the person that you want to meet.
Let go.